This conference will now be recorded.
All right.
I should take a picture of that and text it to Rob, or Rod.
What's that? Oh.
My alert.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, gotcha. I. Yeah, there he is. We've got Rob.
Okay.
Hi, Rob. Sound check real quick before we get started.
Yep.
All right, great. Thanks.
All right. 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the January 19th DeSoto City Council meeting to order. Start with roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Here.
Daniels,
Present.
Hanamichael,
Here.
Ritter, Lane.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, it appears Councilmember Ritter is absent.
Okay. I would invite you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Our first item tonight is our consent agenda. Tonight on the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes from the council meeting of January 5th, approval of pay ordinance number 941, and approval of dedication of utility right-of-way for K10. Anyone have an item they would wish to discuss, or can I have a motion? Consent agenda.
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Hanamichael.
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we have item 1.5, approved pay ordinance number 941A.
I'll make a motion. We approve or pay ordinance 941A.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Lane. Yes. Motion carries.
Okay. Call to public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business. Tonight's agenda. The comments that are discussed under call to public may or may not be acted on by the council during this meeting. Does anyone wish to address the council under call to public? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 3 is old business. We do not have. Go to item 4A, receive results from the 2022 Citizen Satisfaction Survey.
Mayor.
I told myself I needed to start this in a different way other than the moment we've all been waiting for. But honestly, after wanting
When do we add this?
survey for
I
years,
need to add an
that's actually pretty
agenda
accurate.
item.
So, in the fall of 2022, the city and Maze Communication partnered with ETC Institute, which is the national leader of government surveys. And our goal was to, one, implement the city's first ever community survey, and one, gauge citizen satisfaction with city services, and two, understand the community's priorities for the future. So I am happy to introduce Ryan Murray. He is the Assistant Director of Community Research for ETC Institute, and he will walk us through our results. And then
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. This evening, it's a pleasure.
Anthony already alluded to, I'm the Assistant Director of Community Research for ETC here. And we're just based in Olathe, Kansas, right down the road from my office is here, which is fantastic as well. We're really familiar with the area and the county. Got some interesting results for you tonight that we're looking to do my left.
Can we check the mic real fast? Let me,
Somebody didn't replace the battery.
yeah, I'm wondering, well, usually it's louder, but if it didn't turn, like it should have shut off. If it wasn't working. You guys see me? Mic is the mic on?
Try that. There we go.
You're
Yep.
awful quiet, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah.
There we go.
Mhm.
All right. So again, pleasure to be here, everybody. This better?
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
So as Whitney already alluded to, ETC is really the nation's leader, the gold standard we've been called for market research for local government organizations. As you can see in the map here, we do work all across the country, but obviously there's a heavy concentration in this particular area when you look at those bubbles. Also got a couple areas in Texas, Florida, North Carolina, some focus areas, but really the KC Metro is kind of our bread and butter when it comes to doing all sorts of surveys, everything from solid waste, wastewater, water quality with Water One, county survey for Johnson County, and including DeSoto, Kansas now, so we're happy to be here. So the purpose of our survey, as well as most of our surveys we conduct, is really an objective assessment of community services and city services. What we really want to do is gauge perception, satisfaction, understanding with those core services you all provide. Along with that, there's always an opportunity to ask some additional questions. That'll be kind of towards the end of the presentation here tonight, where we've got some one-off questions, some word bubbles that we'll present with some of those open-ended responses. We also want to compare your results nationally and regionally. So as a part of our survey design process, we want to provide our benchmarking database, let folks know we can compare these items, we can't compare these other ones, to give everybody an understanding of how you're performing contextually. This is your first survey, so it's really a benchmark of your performance. It's not really a standard or a litmus test of how you're performing, because before this, we didn't really know what those perceptions were. We weren't sure what all those satisfaction measures might be, and we weren't exactly sure what pulls and levers we could touch and move to maybe boost satisfaction in certain areas, or actually maybe just set the bar for other areas that we're serving residents in. And so throughout the design of the survey, we're making sure that we're getting that objective assessment. We're making sure that those performance variables are there to make sure that the comparisons are apples to apples. And then also throughout the design of the survey, it's developed to provide opportunities for improvement, important satisfaction opportunities. The survey was the first survey administered for the city. It was a 7-page survey. It was by mail and online, so we first mailed out the survey. Residents had an opportunity to participate either by mail or online. Folks at the online survey had to actually include their home address at the end of the survey to ensure that we were matching that to the sample of addresses we had for the city. Folks that took the paper survey had a postage paid return envelope to mail that back to us. So anybody that did that, their address was printed on the back of that survey, unless somebody maybe marked it out or cut it off or something like that. We would have had that home address that particular way. My goal for this project was to receive 250 completed surveys. I've worked with smaller communities across the country. Sometimes this project works really well, sometimes this exercise kind of falls dead, and in DeSoto, it was exceptionally successful. 250 surveys was my goal. That would have given us a statistically representative sample of the community. It would have allowed us to make some assumptions based on what residents are thinking. What we did by completing 507 surveys is bring down the margin of error and heighten the reliability of the results. So as you can see on the screen, margin of error for the results is about 4.6% at the 95% level of confidence. It might be rounded to 4.5 or so if I kind of misspeak throughout the presentation, but 4.6 margin of error for those questions where all respondents provided a response. And what that means, if we were to complete the survey with a sample of the entire city, collecting 507 results in a second time, or 95 out of 100 times if we did that, we'd get these same results plus or minus that margin of error for those questions. So the results are extremely reliable with a small margin of error of about 4.5%. What we do not only is tracking demographics of the survey, because we want to make sure that those surveys that are collected represent the makeup of the community according to Census Bureau results. So we want to track race, ethnicity, age, and those types of things. But we also want to make sure geographic dispersion of the results are kind of throughout the community. We don't want any areas that have residential households to be completely untouched. But we also also don't want some of those more robust neighborhoods to kind of inundate the survey. And what we see here is a pretty good dispersion, and I matched this up with your most recent that I could find online zoning map, and it looks like we covered just about all of those residential areas pretty well here. And I think that goes to say there's only about 2,500 households in the community. We got 500 of them. So that's quite the goal. There's only been a couple times where I've really ever hit that kind of measure where we're getting, a fifth or a quarter of the entire community that completes the survey, which is fantastic. When we talk about bottom line up front, we're talking, things to know. Some of my major findings, some of the things that I just generally take away from the survey at the very top. The full report that we provided comes along with maps, comments, cross tabulations, as well as benchmarking. All of that stuff's in the full report, but this is kind of the major takeaway. 8 out of 10 residents are satisfied or very satisfied with the quality of life in the city. About 3/4 of residents are either very satisfied or very satisfied with the quality of services provided by the city. So vast majority of residents are really satisfied or satisfied with the job that you all are doing, providing equitable services across all those city boundaries that we saw on the previous map. One of the other things to note is that services in DeSoto rated much higher than national average. On average, we'll see communities probably hit above the national average, about half of those areas. As you can see on the screen, you were at about 3/4 of the areas that we're able to assess. You are above the national average, significantly above the national average, and more than 2/3 of those comparable areas. So performing extremely well. What I want to understand, or what I'd like council and mayor to understand tonight, is that the results, as they are, you might say, hey, 70% satisfaction or 74% satisfaction with the overall quality of city services might not be where we want to be. But again, this was our benchmarking survey. This was the first time we went out to residents to ask these types of questions in this manner. And what we want to do is contextualize that with national results from those surveys that we administer nationally. When we talk about perceptions, again, we asked various questions related to perception. Some of this was just kind of fact finding. Some of this was actual, how great the city is a place to live. But here we wanted to understand what are some of those most important things that you consider when deciding to live in DeSoto, or maybe for folks that are deciding to move to DeSoto. And what we found is safety, security, public schools, small town feel, types, and the affordability of the housing kind of taking the top marks at about 70% and above in terms of very important and extremely important responses. Some of the other items that are maybe going to fall short in messaging, or maybe that aren't as strong of opportunities, is marketing the city as in proximity to Lawrence, or maybe employment opportunities. While you might take that one of two ways, what I really take that as is we know that there's not a bunch of industry here yet. We have the battery plant coming, obviously, but really folks are looking for that safe community, small town feel, affordable availability of housing, and good schools. And we see that in our satisfaction remarks on this slide. So when we asked for satisfaction with those overall performance measures or those perceptions of DeSoto, we find kind of a similar breakdown: overall quality of services, quality of life, public education, feeling of safety in the city, and those things all scored exceptionally high, as you can see on this chart here. We'll take a look at some benchmarking here in just a little bit, but I just want you to kind of see how some of these items stacked up. You see quality of DeSoto, or downtown DeSoto towards the bottom of that list. That is one of our opportunities for improvement. And when residents were asked what are some of the things that we could work on here in DeSoto, downtown was mentioned quite frequently. We also did GIS mapping, so we didn't just track the location of those respondents. We wanted to kind of give the city an understanding of if there's any areas or parts of the community that are maybe less or more satisfied than one or the other. When we talk about over quality of services, we're really seeing equitable distribution of very satisfied and satisfied responses on median. When we average these results, they're falling just below that very satisfied threshold, which is about a 4.5 mean. So just under that 4.5 mean, but over about 3.8 is what's going to give us this light blue shading, and that's what we see here in aggregate. When we talk about overall ratings at the city, this is really the grade card or the report card item that I look at first. This will tell me a lot about how the rest of the survey results are going to go. When I hear positive ratings for place to raise children, place to live, somewhere I can continue to live by buying my next home here, I see positive ratings, I know that I'm going to see pretty good ratings, especially stacked up to national averages based on this chart alone. And all three of these items rated significantly higher than regional and national averages. When we asked respondents how likely they'd be to recommend DeSoto as a place to live, kind of a one-off question towards the end of the survey instrument, almost 85% of respondents told us that they'd recommend the city as a place to live. This is the key city services slide. So this is the satisfaction with city services. This is kind of the bulk of the items that you do at a very high level. The items that receive the highest level of dissatisfaction towards the bottom there in those top priorities for improvement, with the quality of planning and community development really taking the cake for the top priority for improvement. I've had long discussions with staff as well as Nancy about this particular item. I do have a strong hunch that if we were to do this in a couple of years after kind of the swell of the information about the battery plant kind of dies down, we should expect planning and community development to not be such a high priority. There's just probably a lot of unknowns for residents at this particular time. We're seeing high levels, it's the highest elevated level of neutral responses there. And while we interpret neutral response as that passing grade, that C average type grade, you didn't make a positive perception or a negative perception, it falls into the high priority for improvement based on the importance ratings that it got. And we'll see that when we get into that analysis. I also want to show the maps. I wanted to show some deviation of that straight blue map. And what we find when we see quality of planning and community development, that's really that northern section, or really that northwestern section of the community that's less satisfied with the other parts of the community with that particular rating item. When we talk about city leadership performed very well. About 1/3 or more folks in that neutral category. So passing grade. Anecdotally, this has been a really tough item nationwide. This has been something that all communities have struggled with. I've been removing this from surveys from clients that have been administering their survey year over year. They're dropping this trend out of their survey. Some for good reason, others in fear of what the results might be. But you scored pretty well here, in my opinion. And when I base that, is I'm basing it off of half or more folks are satisfied, and the little amount of folks that are dissatisfied. So we're summing the very dissatisfied and dissatisfied responses there in the red. We're seeing about 10 or 15% there. Given our margin of error, that's a very slim group of folks in the community that are dissatisfied with quality of leadership, effectiveness of administration, accessibility, responsiveness. That was the only one we didn't have benchmarking for, but as you can see in the note below, rated significantly above those averages in both of those top items. When we talk about benchmarks, this is a way to contextualize your results. So as I mentioned earlier, folks might not be happy with the 75% of respondents who are satisfied with the quality of customer service. That is far and away above anything that we see in the Plains region or the U.S. as a whole. One of the things that's really tough about that, especially being a smaller community, is that you have some state roads running through here. I'm sure there's some county roads as well on the other side of town. It's difficult for average residents to understand if they're calling the city about a county issue, why they're being diverted, or sometimes folks are calling about things that just don't have anything to do with the city business specifically. And so again, that's kind of here's another phone call, here's somebody else that you can contact. So inevitably when we have communities like this, there's going to be people that are going to call, they're going to email you, they're bound to be dissatisfied with their experience. To see 3/4 of folks indicate that they're satisfied with that particular item is just astounding. We have Parks and Recreation rating extremely high, law enforcement, street maintenance, communication, and wastewater and water utility services. Now that one is more closely aligned with the U.S. average, but it's about 2 percentage points above, which is verging on that very significant, but you're significantly higher than our regional average for that particular item. This is perceptions of the city. While you're not rating significantly above image or appearance, those are kind of eye of the beholder items. As you can see, their national averages hover in that 50, mid-50, high 50 range. Quality of downtown, significantly below the particular averages that we presented here. But again, that's a top priority for residents in terms of those open-ended responses. The key ones is public education, safety, quality of services provided by the city. Those are the ones that are going to drive satisfaction in other key areas, and you're performing extremely well in all of those items. The one that I saved for last, value received for city tax dollars and fees, another item residents have been extremely dissatisfied with ever since about, I'd say, fall of 2020, when we've seen a sharp decrease in that particular item. As you can see, the benchmarkings hover about 1/3 of folks being satisfied. You're at 43%, and while we might not be satisfied with that particular rating, it's extremely good when we, again, contextualize against averages. Street maintenance, this is an area that almost every community continually struggles with. It's one of our biggest ticket items, except for policing services and public safety usually, and it's one of those items that it's just tough to keep up with. So residents are always going to find something to kind of be upset about, whether that's a new pothole after a snowstorm, and we've had some shoveling going on, whether that's a maintenance of sidewalk, understanding whether or not residents are responsible for some of that maintenance of sidewalks can impact those ratings. But what's important here is, again, significantly higher than the U.S. average. So while we want to focus on and try to improve satisfaction in some of these key areas, specifically maintenance of sidewalks, efforts to prevent street flooding, some of those items towards the bottom, we're performing very well when we contextualize ourselves. When we talk about water and wastewater utilities, this is really one of the only areas that we're kind of just performing at or below that average. That's quality of drinking water. I'm sure that the city of DeSoto is providing safe, quality drinking water. What I think would help a lot would be communication around maintenance issues or particular smell or taste or clarity problems that might arise during the year. Now, we have these issues nationwide. Water providers all over the country have their hiccups or issues with their providing, with the water that they're providing. As long as that water is safe, that is really going to be the main driver of satisfaction there. So continually emphasizing how safe the water is, regardless of the clarity or the smell. And sometimes the smell, taste, clarity, those are difficult things to control for wastewater or water providers. When we talk about code enforcement, just kind of meeting some of the national average items up at the top here: exterior maintenance of business property, enforcing sign regulations. When we get to the items that folks are more dissatisfied with, we're talking about debris on private property, mowing and cutting of weeds on private property. Usually we'll see those things spike when we do the surveys in the spring or the summer months, but we did see significantly below average responses there. About 1/3 of respondents giving us satisfied responses on that. When we talk about communication, we're performing extremely well. It's going to be important to leverage the satisfaction and communication moving forward to try to help set the bar. Now that we've gotten these performance measures, we know how we're compared to the national average. It'll be important to communicate with residents what our bar is set at, what type of expectations you should have for the delivery of some of these key services. And in the future, that'll help us kind of realign our numbers with actual service levels. Actual perceptions are now based on kind of reality, or where we've set the bar for what you should be expecting in terms of our website, efforts to inform, but all those other items that we saw in the benchmarking as well. So as I alluded to at the top of the presentation, the design of the survey is meant to develop priorities for improvement. Even if the city rated 100% satisfaction in all the categories that you see up on the screen here, folks still would have rated their performance in an ascending method like this. We asked respondents out of all the items that were on this list to select the 2 items that are most important for the city to emphasize over the next 2 years. The 4 items at the top were the 4 items in a previous slide that I mentioned had the highest levels of dissatisfaction because they were of below average satisfaction and above average importance or emphasis here in this slide. They turned out to be top priorities for improvement. Now, quality of planning and community development was the top priority for improvement. I do have a strong feeling that is going to change as time progresses, as we get further into this planning and development process. But the items that are going to continue to impact resident satisfaction is the water and wastewater utility services. That is the second highest priority. It will likely remain a high priority unless we do some work to kind of mitigate whatever issues we've had in the past, or to start being more communicative about expect this, expect that, this is on the horizon, those types of messaging items that are going to give folks the expectation that then you can meet or exceed. We talk about effectiveness of city communication, just barely a top priority. Same with street maintenance. Those things are just barely high priorities in our book. If you've looked at the report, which you'll get, I believe, tonight or tomorrow, you'll notice that those are just barely on the threshold. So just slight improvements in satisfaction in both those areas, regardless of their importance, would keep those below our high priority for improvement items. And again, like I mentioned, planning and community development is likely to fall out of that top priority item eventually. When we talk about parks and recreation, I wanted to make this a standalone chart. You performed exceptionally well in all of these items, specifically maintenance of the parks, quality of your aquatic center, condition of park equipment, all those core service areas that we have residents participating in or using most frequently. Aquatic centers are really the most popular parks and recreation amenity in the world, it feels like. I administer probably 50 to 70 parks and recreation surveys a year. Indoor aquatic center is always the most desired, most needed, and most important amenity to respondents. To perform at 75% in that particular method with only 5% combined dissatisfied, very dissatisfied responses is astounding for that particular item. As we go down this list, we have less common knowledge of the services and programs, such as the quality of the city's youth program, senior center, so we're seeing elevated passing grades. That's probably a passing glance at some of those service level items that you're looking at here. And then number of indoor recreation facilities. I'm guessing that there's not a plethora of those types of facilities in town. So some of these ratings just make a lot of sense. We wanted to understand what folks maybe would like to see in the future as well. We do a lot of park complaining surveys. These things were actually quite aligned with our national trends that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. When we talk about programming, special events, what we've seen really over the last 5 to 10 years is a draw from residents to want to participate in events that are kind of regardless of age or ability. Everybody can participate. Really, since COVID, we've seen a strong emphasis in those particular items. Folks getting out in the community, gathering together, they really want to see those types of things. What I thought was great was nature-based education activities. I think that's kind of a regional thing for our particular region. Arts and culture, right along the lines of the first one of special events, and then senior programming, about a quarter of our residents saying that's something that we have a need for in the future. When it comes to amenities, actually some of the amenities that we have here are some of the areas we're performing very well in the previous chart. Community parks, walking paths and trails, indoor all-purpose recreation facilities, one of those needs. It's one of the areas we didn't perform as well in, but about 1/3 of respondents said, hey, we could use something like that. Miller Park improvements, I apologize for my typo there. I did not realize that until just now, so I apologize for that. Bike lanes, Riverfest Park Band Shelter and Amphitheater. That's a wordy one. Splash pad and aquatic center upgrade. So even though you're performing very well in the aquatic center, I think folks are thinking long term. They're kind of thoughtfully taking the survey. And we had 1 out of 4 respondents tell us that that was one of the amenities that they'd like to see improved moving forward. When we talk about communication, although it's a top priority, the city's performing extremely well in this particular area. What I like to do is usually 2-part the communication question. I want to know first where folks are getting that information most frequently. That's really going to help the city understand where should we be, what are gaps that we could start filling in terms of communication, what sites, what locations should we be, and what we're seeing here is really discovering DeSoto, which I know is not technically a city-managed communication source, but something we should definitely be looking into. The city newsletter is way up there as well. While about 1/3 of folks, 30% of folks indicated, hey, seldom or never am I using that particular newsletter, a vast majority of folks are using it at least a 5, 4, or 3 on that 5-point scale there. We're talking community Facebook page. That's different than our Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. That is really like an official City of DeSoto communication page. So we're not necessarily talking about some of those other items, and I apologize, I meant to say city Facebook page. Community Facebook page is right up there as well. What we'd like to see is kind of a switch, kind of a rotation of those particular items. And part of the reason for that is that we asked effectiveness of the following communications as well. And we found Discovery DeSoto, but then we found community Facebook page up towards the top as well. While folks indicated that they use the city newsletter more frequently than the Facebook page came out as a more effective means of communication, which means that the city isn't really managing those messages. And so what we want to do is kind of shift this to see city Facebook page, the city newsletter, kind of become the top used, but also those most effective. So we want to kind of try to get a shift in what residents are drifting towards in terms of, hey, I need some information or what's going on in the community. And a lot of communities are struggling with those community Facebook pages just kind of taking over. And so it's not firsthand knowledge. Oftentimes it's hearsay or gossip within the community. And those are the things that kind of drive some perceptions in some communities. So if you have a small water issue or something like that down the line, one of the first places folks are going to go is the community Facebook page. And so they're not getting information directly for the city. I think that's one of the biggest opportunities for improvement when it comes to communication, although you scored very well in those other performance-related items. We talk about other ways residents would like to communicate. It's really mailed and email newsletters. I always tell my clients you should be getting as many opt-in emails and text message numbers that you possibly can. Text messaging has become very effective. Notify Jocos are extremely popular service for kind of the more general community when we're talking water services or emergency services, when we're talking kind of Greater County to the east of us here. But those mailed newsletters are still important to residents. When we do studies for Parks and Rec organizations that have shifted from a mailed newsletter to a digital-only newsletter, we see sharp decreases in satisfaction with availability of information, knowing what's going on, and also like satisfaction with the proximity to park facilities and locations, which is interesting because just because we stop mailing a newsletter doesn't mean you live further away from anything. It just means you're less informed about where things are. And so these 3 things towards the top here are going to be really the most important areas that are going to influence those previous 2 charts to kind of give us a dichotomy shift in terms of getting away from that printed Discover DeSoto, getting away from that community page, and focusing more solely on the city as the primary communication source. Along the communication lines, we had folks ask us, or we had the survey ask residents what their level of interest was in learning more about the Sunflower Ammunition Plant and how it impacts the city. We had very interesting really taking the lead here with about 60% of respondents, another 28% interested. So the vast majority of folks are interested in what's going on with that particular site. I know that the counties had got some folks that are gonna, I think, did a site visit today, or they're doing it tomorrow. I was with JCPRD yesterday, and so there's definitely some plans for that particular site. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but residents are definitely interested. And I think this kind of, in conjunction with the battery plant that's going on, I think this is the primary reason that you're seeing that planning and development with such high dissatisfaction, such high importance. Folks are just more and more interested about learning what's going on. And when we ask residents how easy it is to find the information they're looking for on our website, 82% indicate that it's easy or very easy. But what we found in some of those previous sites, just not a lot of residents are frequenting that site enough. And so sometimes I suggest, hey, robust websites are a really good method, but nowadays we really need to be putting that information in the hands of respondents and hands of residents versus just making sure the website has everything. I noticed on your website you've got that ticker bar at the top. Every, I'm sure, major item at the city or every major event that's going on at the city, I'm sure is on the ticker bar. It looks like your website's updated quite frequently. It's just the fact that they go under use nationwide. So it's something that we need to continue to maintain, 'cause if we don't, just like the printed newsletters, we're gonna have dissatisfaction. But what we need to focus on most is putting that information right in the palm of their hand, using those handheld devices such as our community Facebook page, email newsletters, and text messages. When we ask respondents, and this kind of goes along the line of 75% of respondents being satisfied with customer service at the city, about half of our residents indicated they've interacted with the city in the past year. When we asked how easy it was, 85% of respondents told us it was very easy or somewhat easy to contact the person they needed. That's phenomenal. That's what's leading to your high satisfaction scores, regardless of the fact that some residents are going to leave with a sour taste in their mouth. You know, some folks are calling about county roads, state items, things like that, things that the city just doesn't handle. These are the ways that we can make sure that folks stay satisfied. You call, it's easy to find that person that you need. We talk about what department did you contact. Water department was by far, in a way, that most frequently contacted department, followed by front office, city clerk, and then about 10% saying public works, parks and rec, and code enforcement. And that's predicated on that 48% there. We talk about additional findings. That's what I was alluding to earlier in the presentation. We asked residents what type of businesses they'd like to see in town. We asked them to rate that on a 5-point agreement scale. We had restaurant, bars, and pubs. This goes along the lines of some of the open-ended responses that we're about to see. Health and personal care stores. We're seeing some neutrals here as well, so I'd really be focusing on these top 3 or 4 items, from specialty grocers and food services, gyms, health and personal care stores, up to restaurants and bars. Folks are less likely to desire or have a need for this big box stores. That's definitely the one that folks are definitely not interested in. When we talk about DeSoto and the reason that you want to live here, the big box stores kind of juxtaposes that, or kind of rubs up against that in a different way. We talk about other responses for this particular question. We asked, what other types of businesses would you like to see? We had 69 write-in responses. When I ran the frequency table, there were 75 mentions of hardware. So more than the number of responses there. Folks were putting it double in a couple of their responses. I think there was one respondent that put it in 3 times. But hardware is definitely that big one. That's why store is so large. But really, it was primarily the hardware store is what folks are looking for. When we talk about what we would do to improve DeSoto, I wanted to put a count here because I just don't think these bubbles do a great job of telling us what some of the counts are, and I think that helps contextualize these results. Downtown, restaurants, streets, those are some of the things that we should be really improving. Businesses, stores. We had some sidewalk maintenance issues when we're talking about comparative averages and things like that, and then water. So really up here towards the top when we're talking about improvements, folks are looking to improve our downtown, our restaurant scene, our streets, and bringing in some new businesses into the community. When we talk about what 3 words you use to describe DeSoto, we're saying friendly, small, quiet, safe, growing, and those are some of those words that would suggest to me folks aren't going to be real happy about a big box store coming into town. But these are really great phases for DeSoto, especially when we look at, would you recommend DeSoto as a place to live? What are some of the reasons that you live here? There's a lot of alignment with this particular question 23 with question 1. We talk about what you like most about DeSoto. Again, small town, schools, people, close, friendly, community. There was some mentions of Lawrence. They were kind of positive and negative. But as we saw in some of our previous slides, folks are really interested in what DeSoto has to offer, not so much the proximity to Lawrence. When we talk about what does small town feel, say to you, or mean to you, it's friendly, it's about the people, it's about our neighbors, it's safe, and it's community. And those are kind of the top ones. We got more small, more quiet, more folks saying, hey, we could use some more businesses. But for the most part, what we're seeing is a really strong trend of that small, tight-knit community type feel, and folks really seem to enjoy that here. And with that, I'll take any questions. I've got the full report with me. Anything I can't answer, I'll get with Nancy. Whitney on, I apologize, it's a long day, and we'll get those responses to you as quickly as possible.
Okay. Any questions from council? Start out with a quick one. So the time to complete this was like 15 to, is that typical?
Yeah, the park surveys will kind of take on 17 to 20 minute length, but the reason that I have that figure is because in our algorithm that tracks our survey responses, I'm tracking to see how long it takes to complete the survey, and any completed surveys are well outside of the average, typically the lower end. I'm flagging those because I don't want people to just get in and take an entire survey that I know takes more than 5 minutes to read and just circle all the nines or circle all the ones or something. So we're tracking all that. So when I get in there and track that stuff, I want to see average time, and that's very average for a survey this long.
Okay. And then the frequency of re-administering, when would we expect to administer our follow-up, our next survey?
My professional recommendation is to stick with the particular time frame in which we administer. Mr. Belcher's got some good experience with that from the county survey, but if we start switching the time of year we're completing the survey, we'll see priorities shift based on that time of year situation. What we really want to be doing is giving the city enough time to react and act on these results. I say every 2 years is really that sweet spot.
Got to have a little time to
Yes.
make some response to the areas you need to.
Because we administered the survey beginning, end of last year, beginning of this year. If you were to try to do that here this fall, you'd have limited time to test any kind of strategies or ideas leading up to the next survey. So there's always that suggestion to get that every 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
So back on question 1 in the slide, talking about satisfaction with city service. Towards the bottom, you mentioned the quality of planning and community development was one that needs improvement. Then the next exhibit was the quality of planning and community development as far as kind of geographics of the city. And it appears that everything south of Lexington Avenue, 83rd, K10 was kind of in that satisfied category, and everything kind of north in the older parts of town, and that was more neutral. So is that kind of indicating that they're less satisfied in the older parts of town as far as the development that's being planned in that area and upgrades, things like that?
Yeah, I think that tells us a lot, and you all know the city much better than I do. So if that's the older part of town, are the residents typically more established on that part of town as well?
Yeah, probably.
Probably, or maybe so. If that's the case, then I would definitely see that as a contributing factor to the neutral average in that particular area of town. Now, if that were new development and all newer residents to the city, that would be kind of an anomaly. But what we'll typically see is like center town areas of larger communities, we'll see then kind of the most against new planning and development, or the type of planning and development that cities are doing, primarily because they live in a well-established neighborhood for the most part. So that's an excellent point that I just didn't have the context for.
So kind of indicative of a little bit more focus of planning and community development in that section then,
Yes, sir.
as far as some of the priority. All right, thank you.
I think a lot of my questions after looking through this are maybe not so much about the survey, but okay, so now what?
Right.
And I was curious, if I'd looked at this a little bit sooner, I probably would have taken the time, but I was curious how this aligned with our planning session from the fall of 21 that we did at JUCO. What were we thinking the priorities are, or what were we thinking the needs are relative now to what this is coming out to show, and be kind of curious about that. And I think some of this data is good for how do we promote DeSoto? How do we promote why us, particularly even with economic development pursuits in terms of lifestyle and that kind of thing. Some of the ones that need the most work beyond planning and development, which, like you say, is probably a perception issue, is water, wastewater services, street maintenance services, which are primarily funding items. I mean, that becomes a matter of how much money are we putting every year into street repaving, and those things that people see and feel as part of the city services. We may think we're keeping it up as adequate, but are those parts getting adequately funded? And then I think, like you said, in terms of communicating, if the community Facebook pages get messages out about pothole or poor snow removal or cloudy, smelly water or whatever it is, but yet we're not talking about the upgrades that we're making and the progress that's being made and the repairs that are being made, then that balanced out. So, how much of it is an element of learning what we need to communicate? How much of it is a tool that we can use to promote ourselves? And then how does it align with what we think our priorities are? So a lot of what was going through my head was, now what? Now what do we do with it?
Okay. Lori?
The one, I don't know if it's really a question or a comment, but when, like the screen you have right now, what Rob was bringing up, they're less satisfied, but they're not really dissatisfied. So when you have a lot of the questions, a lot of the, we started to say, okay, down at the bottom, there's more neutral. Well, I wonder how many are neutral because, one, they just don't know about it. It was of not interest to them. And neutral doesn't necessarily mean dissatisfied. And so I guess that in a lot of the areas, when when you look at the big amount in neutral, I wonder how misleading or, there's not, how many times, I guess the question, did they just not answer it because they didn't want to answer it, in comparison to say, oh, I really don't know, so I'm going to put neutral. I don't really know any different, so I'm going to put neutral.
We have that. I could go over some of that with you right now. So in terms of dissatisfaction on that particular item, about 1 in 5 residents were dissatisfied. That's actually significantly below the dissatisfaction levels for the quality of city water and wastewater utility services that came in at about 23%. Now, if I look at my tabular data, what I have are the response levels of those don't knows. And I think that could be telling for some of this when we talk about planning and community development. Just trying to make sure that I'm getting there. And then the full report will have this. But when we talk about quality of planning and development, only 6.3 of respondents indicated that they would like to not provide a response or provided that don't know response. So that's either a skipping of that question or circling don't know on that paper survey. When we take those don't knows out, that's when we see the 19.4% dissatisfaction. With the don't knows included, we're looking at about an 18% dissatisfaction, so still about 1 out of 5. So when it comes to quality of planning and community development, definitely more along the neutral lines, which again, I always suggest a passing grade in that particular area. The reason that I wanted to show this particular one was that it was one of our top priorities for improvement. And I think if we get to that other slide, the street maintenance slide, or the street maintenance map, which I did not include, we would actually see kind of more satisfaction generally throughout the community. So there was just an interesting breakdown of responses in aggregate, pushing that response more into the neutral than into the satisfaction. And based on what Mr. Daniels had alluded to, it is interesting that that group or that part of the community is maybe more established in terms of older development.
I don't totally agree with that, though, because you've got timber trails in that area, and there's a huge, that's not that old. And you also have a lot of, you've got the whole school cover in that one section right there, and so that's not even anybody. On the very far right, there's not any houses out there either. So, it is the old part of town, but yet south of Lexington, where DeMeadows is much older than Timber Trails, so.
And if you looked at the map of the dots of the respondents, it was pretty heavy up in the Timber Trails area.
Yeah, so.
So, yeah, those are
So
great
it's,
observations.
but it is interesting that it's quite a division like that.
Okay. Anything else?
I feel that a lot of the people that took this survey were overwhelmed between the events that's happening to the town and then the survey coming out. And I I think, do you feel that there was any correlation there because of the questions that the people don't know, the answers to what's coming? And, the questions they had about the plant, the ordinance plant future? And, do you think this had affected some of that on this neutral section? I think they were overwhelmed, really, and I think that may have affected this survey.
Yeah, I definitely like getting these insights, because these are things that you just don't know sitting at your desk in Olathe, what's going on, on the streets in DeSoto. And one of the things to always keep in mind is that we try to ask questions about different topics throughout. So the level of interest in receiving additional information from the plant, overwhelmingly, folks are very interested in receiving additional information. When we talk about planning and development, it wasn't that it received overly high levels of dissatisfaction or extremely high levels of neutral responses. It was that it was one of the most important items for the city to emphasize moving forward. And that's what really drove its important satisfaction rating really through the roof, above 0.2. And so I think that there is some weariness or some uneasiness in the respondents. And that's another reason that I would suggest you should expect for that planning and development item to kind of drop out of the importance or emphasis moving forward once we start to kind of get the ball rolling on some of these other decisions that need to be made.
Okay.
But
Okay, that's all I
there
had,
did seem to
Mayor.
be some uneasiness in the respondents with planning and development, which is, from my experience, rarely a top priority for improvement in most communities. Although it never really hits the mark, meaning that it's not the highest level of satisfaction in any community, it's rarely more important than public safety or parks, which is what we saw here.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you very much for your report
Thank you, Mayor.
tonight.
See you guys in 2 years, and we'll be back if that's the case. Be more than willing to
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure.
And council, we'll have more information at my staff report time. I'd planned on giving what's next. So, yeah, I'll turn it over to Whitney and Nancy at that time.
Okay.
Answer some of those questions.
Very good. Item 4B, consider task order for engineering replacement of the east water tower.
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, this was a project that was slated, and PEC is one of our on-call engineers, and we're gonna have them, they've built our water distribution model, so we're gonna have them evaluate the elevation of the new tank, the capacity of the new tank, and the size of it. So this is the first effort in the design and construction of the new tank. This will give us an idea of how big it needs to be and what elevation, so. And I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Okay. How big will this tank be related to the new tank out by Panasonic?
A lot smaller. Probably 100,000 gallons versus 1.5 million.
Okay.
Yep.
What's the tank size on Sunflower and 95th?
Yeah, that's 500,000 gallons.
Okay. Any other questions? Ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the task order with PEC, $9,800.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Daniels.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Consider contract amendment for replacing the pipe network in the well field with Rice Check Construction Company.
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, when we were constructing the wells, reconstructing the wells in the well field and putting the pipe in to connect them into the raw water lines, we found that some of the water lines weren't the size that we had originally thought they were. They were 16 inches. We thought they were 8, so we had to change some of our plumbing configurations. In doing this, we also took an opportunity to put in a Y, so to ease maintenance. They call it pigging the line, but it's basically you just clean the line out you insert, a pig in a line, just pull it through and clean out the sludge. So we're, in addition to making the minimum requirements needed, we are adding some functionality in the future.
Okay. Any questions for city engineer on this item? or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion, we authorize the work change directive number 1 in the amount of $56,910.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Item 4D, consider resolution 1097, committing to provide matching funds for base grant applications for the water treatment plant expansion, water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant expansion, and the new tower at the Astra Enterprise Park.
Again, Mayor and members of the council, and we're preparing, the state has issued, it's part of the Spark Grant Program, Phase 2.0. The first phase, we had submitted a couple projects and weren't selected for those projects. They included some roadway improvements related to the 103rd and Lexington project. Since that time, our priorities have shifted a little bit. KDOT's taken a bigger role in those projects, so we have a stronger need in the water sewer improvements. So we're recommending to withdraw those original applications because we're maxed out at 3 on those, and then resubmit for the water plant expansion, this water treatment plant expansion, and construction of the new water tower at Astor Park.
Okay.
And part of that application process, the governing body to participate in the cost, the cost share of the grant, which is 25% in this case.
Any questions from council?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 1097 to authorize participation in the base grant match.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Item 4E, consider amendment for temporary traffic signals at Kill Creek Road with Sasoya and Sons Construction.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I would recommend that we table this item tonight. I spoke with the contractor, Society today, and they've offered to actually sell us that equipment and at a price of $32,500. So when you work, they've not completed the contract that we're under now because we still have $3,500 to demobilize and take those signals down. So when everything works out, it'd be an additional $9,000 to actually purchase them, and we'd have them, available through the construction of, the influx of workforce out at the construction of the Panasonic plant. So we'll bring this back, if that's okay with you.
Very good.
Okay.
I make a motion,
Make a
we
motion to
table
table it.
the item 4E. Which one are we at? 4E.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, we'll table that. Thank you, Chet. Item 4F, we're going to add an item right here to make an appointment to the Northwest Consolidated Fire District Board. I would like to reappoint Doug Bedford to the board for another term. And I would like a motion to approve resolution number 1098 to make it so.
I'll make a motion, we approve resolution 1098 as written.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
When are our other appointees due to be, or slots to appoint up?
Do they rotate? Bob Garrett, I think, will be the next one, and his will come up next year. And then the year after that, it will be our turn for the appointment of the position that Walt McDaniel's in. So every year, we have one appointment for the next 2 years.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Huntermichael,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right. Item 5 is executive session. We do not have one, so we'll go to item 6, advisory reports. City Administrator.
Yes, Mayor and Council, I want to remind you of our open house, informational open house come and go meeting. That'll be next Wednesday, January 25th, from 5 to 7 in the community center. Just a general forward-facing public information about Panasonic specifically and Astra development in more general, and everything that we know currently about pending developments in that area. And Mayor, with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Whitney to give a brief update on some of the other communications efforts that are about to begin and that are ongoing and have now been completed.
Certainly.
Or Nancy, or both.
So the open house, one thing, that we'll have there, just want to kind of highlight some of the folks that will be there, so you can talk to folks from KDOT, the consortium of community colleges will be there, and KDHE. The city will have information, so it's really just a stop and go way to start talking with residents, and we'll also be asking questions of them while they're there too. So we'll be able to compile even more information about specifically what their questions and concerns are related to the development. And then the other thing that we have is on the newly designed, beautifully designed website for DeSoto. There is a Designing DeSoto tab, and Designing DeSoto is the internal initiative to try to, have residents help us design DeSoto. And so folks can go there and find out all different ways that they can start to get involved in helping to create the strategic plan and the vision for the city moving forward. And for what Ryan was just talking about, we'll be having an e-newsletter that has information coming out soon. So if you look at the schedule right there, that outlines all of the different kind of milestones in developing the city's strategic plan. So we just want to have like a one-stop place where residents feel to go and to kind of learn about all these initiatives. So what was the other topic?
Well, Nancy, I was just going to add on to that, kind of about the what's next question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the survey, the community benchmark survey really was the first step in this strategic plan initiative, the community engagement part of that. It's kind of sets our baseline. Now we can inform our decisions and discussion based on those survey results. So that was kind of the first step in what's next then, which is kind of on the schedule. The strategic plan essentially will take place throughout the course of 2023. Also, we'll be developing in the spring economic development strategy. So part of this effort is to assist the economic development EDC chamber efforts with those strategies. And you can see the rest of the schedule, June through August, Economic Development Council business plan. And then January through March of 2024, we're looking at city organizational plan. And then May of 24, major updates to the comprehensive plan, possibly city code, those sorts of efforts. So this is really the schedule moving forward is the 18-month sort of plan for the public outreach, the new visioning, the kind of reset on this community discussion, and civic engagement there. So I thought it was very good to show, well, first of all, the new look website. I mean, I think it's a great new look there. The content changes are really focused on the Designing DeSoto thing. That's new. I don't think you've seen that before. At least I think it was new within the past couple days, is this Designing DeSoto landing page. But also, we still have the Sunflower redevelopment. We probably need to rename this to Astra. Right. This was the one that we developed early on, right after the governor's announcement. And we developed this page to kind of help give some background as a resource for people to go and ask questions. So that's still there. So yeah, take a look around the new website. This is the one that was essentially included as part of the package with Civic. What are they called? Civic Plus. Yeah. Yeah.
It just, it went live today at 1, so this is.
Yeah, this is brand new.
Yeah.
Yep.
So nice.
Yep. And Whitney's done had a lot of effort put into that, and, you know, some great new graphics, great new photos of the community. Great new, you know, some of the drone photos are just really sharpen this thing up very nicely.
It looks really nice. One other quick thing is that another use of the survey data, and you might have said this and it ran past me, was it will help us inform an overall communications strategic plan. So before we can do that, we need to hear, like, what do people want to know about? Where are those gaps in information that they have? And then also, how do they want to receive their information? So it was very enlightening, the survey results were very enlightening in that regard, and so we'll be working on that. And then also using it, to your point, to kind of identify a little bit more what the essence of DeSoto is. So when we go to sell DeSoto through the EDC, that aligns, right? So one question that I was really happy that we included was, what does small town mean to you? Because everybody says, oh, I love small town DeSoto. Well, now we know what that means and how we can kind of actually tell that as part of this school. So, yeah.
Good. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. That concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Patrick, do you have anything for the council tonight?
I do not. Thanks for letting me participate virtually.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. City planner, no. City engineer.
All of our major projects are progressing well. We're still negotiating contracts for the water and wastewater treatment plants, but no big hiccups from a construction standpoint. They are going to switch traffic next week on Lexington from the outside lanes to the inside lanes, so they can start working. I'm sorry, from the inside to the outside, so they can start working on the median piece. So.
Okay. Assistant City Administrator.
I have just a couple quick things. The first one is Chet and I worked last year on an RFQ, excuse me, for the multimodal trail along Sunflower Road that the city received a grant for last year. We are asking for council representation on that. So I'm not sure if they're due back next week. So we could come back at the next meeting if you guys want to discuss it, or we could have a discussion right now of who would like to be on that committee. And then we also have filled a Parks and Recreations program position that came in, was approved in the 2023 budget. So Parks and Recreation, myself and Erica in the front office, we sat down on a panel interview and finished those 2 weeks ago. And then after kind of a slow start, you may remember in 21 we entered a contract with Enterprise Fleet Management for some vehicles. Due to kind of the market picking back up, we're starting to see those vehicles trickle back in. If you've been driving around DeSoto, you may notice that inspections and the water department have got 2 brand new F-150s rolling around. And so we are expecting to not see as many delays. We have 3 more vehicles that are coming in the next 6 weeks. And I'm expecting to provide you guys kind of an update and a recommendation for the 2024 budget of if we should continue that program. We didn't really want to give a report because it wasn't really Enterprise's fault we weren't able to get vehicles. No one was able to buy vehicles if you drove by a car dealership, and they're just kind of a symptom of the market. So we'll provide that during the 2024 budget process, a recommendation. With that, that's about it.
Any word on the Lightning?
We have not had any word on the Lightning. It has been sitting in production. So basically that means they've received the order. I've been checking about once a week. The key thing is if you get a VIN. If you get a VIN, that means you're getting one. That Lightning has not gotten a VIN. All the other vehicles we've ordered have received VINs, so I'm not holding my breath, but I'd like to get one because I just like to see how they.
I would suggest a naming contest. If we ever get that VIN, we need to name this thing. Community naming contest for the Lightning.
For the Lightning. Flash. All right.
Sparky.
Council comments. Rob, you want to start us tonight? Any comments for the group tonight?
Sure. Any update on the Lexington Avenue exit lights since KDOT redid them and created some severe confusion when you got off on Lexington Avenue? the left turn arrow was gone. And yet the opposing traffic still remained a red light. So people would not go, turn left, they'd crawl into the intersection and kind of be waiting, hesitant. And any update on that type of situation and the confusion that was created?
Yeah, Rob, you and I communicated over the weekend about that, and I forwarded those issues to the contractor. They went out and, they did have an explanation as to why the signal heads weren't exactly aligned with the lanes, but didn't really give me an explanation as to why there wasn't a left turn arrow. Other than ultimately that'll be fixed when the permanent signal goes in. But I think we still need to work with them on that issue. So yeah, we'll close the loop with them.
Yeah, because everybody's yielding right now when they have the left turn because the present traffic's red. And I mean, I've seen it over and over where people don't go when they have the green, and then they crawl into it and they're kind of looking around like, am I supposed to? Are they going to go? Or are they not going to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing because you don't know that it's a split phase it's just a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if you get far enough, you can kind of glance back and see, oh, wait, they have a red light. I am supposed to go. But by then, one or two cars get through instead of the number of cars they're supposed to.
And a green arrow would solve that.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's where there's 3 lights on the far left. There's 4 lights on the middle 2. And it seems like one of the 4 light ones should be on the left side, not in the middle lane.
Yeah. Understood. We'll get that resolved. I think some of these things are a function of the pace and scale and unique nature of KDOT's delivery of that.
But that's one that needs to be resolved before the permanent lights.
Oh yeah.
Timing of the permanent lights. It needs to get cleared up.
Well, yeah, if it's 2 years on the polls, we don't want to sit with this for 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
I might add to that. I had a meeting with KDOT today and requested they're going to get that switched out as soon as they can get it's just a little LED light that has an arrow on it. Used to, you could just slide a different screen over the front of it. But yeah, Society is planning to get that done soon.
Very good.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
That's all I got for tonight.
All right. Thank you. Danny?
Nothing, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Lori?
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Kevin?
Nothing.
All right. I'll make it nothing unanimous, so.
I'll make a motion, then we adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Now, the YouTube video is still going.